So now Jasmine's going to talk about the basics of figure set.
Hi, okay, yes. So let's get into the figure components that all figures should have, regardless of whether it's a chart, a graph, a drawing, etc. So the first thing we're going to want is the figure number itself. Here you'll see at the top it says figure 1. Notice that it's capitalized so that it can refer back to where it's placed in the text. And then we also have the title here, Changes in Work Attitude, as a function of day and time. So that tells us what we're supposed to find or what's going to be in the figure. So we don't have to guess. And then this might seem obvious, but we have the image itself. And I would say for this, you want to make sure that whatever figure you choose is the best one to represent the information that you're going to have in your text. So that's not guidance that we're going to give you. That's something that you'll decide as you're writing your paper. Of course, there are other elements that you'll have in your figure, depending on what kind of figure you have. So here we have a line graph, and we have the axes, the y and the axes, and we have the tick marks here. But because this is a line graph or a graph, we have the axes labels here, so work attitude, time of day, and we also have a key here on this, well, I guess it's on my right-hand side, and that tells you what, you can see that this darker color and this lighter color represent different things. And so the symbols in whatever symbols you have in your graph or chart are going to be in this key. And you'll notice also that this key is contained within the borders of the graph. So that's another thing to think about. And then the last thing here is going to be the note. Not all figures are going to have a note, but you'll see them pretty often. In the note, there are going to be things that cannot necessarily be understood from the title or from just looking at the figure itself. And so that can be specific or general. These notes all often or also can contain p-values and attribution. So anything where you need to give credit about a figure will be there too. So let's get into thinking about some of the more or the best practices for some of these. Oops. So first, let's start with the figure number. We're going to want to use numerals, so figure 1, figure 2, and capitalize figure and bold the label. And so, yeah, that's like that's the basic style element of that. We're going to make sure that the figures are in numerical order and that the multiple figures don't have the same number. So sometimes that can happen if, say, we're working in our paper and we decide to move paragraphs around, and maybe we don't check as part of our last proofreading step to make sure that the figures still match up with where they're referred to in the paper. So that's an easy thing that could happen to anyone, but it's something to look out for. So here, in this example here, everything looks good. We have the labels here, but you'll notice that figure is not capitalized and there's no figure number. So a good edit would be to capitalize figure and to add figure 3 so that we can understand where this figure, where it's explained in the text, where we can refer to in the text. The next one is going to be the figure title. Style elements, it's going to clearly and concisely describe the figure. We're going to capitalize it in title case, italicize it. And this might seem obvious. We might think, well, of course I need a title, but there are some things to keep in mind. We need to be thoughtful about how we create our title and what we do with it. So we don't want it to be misleading, vague, or too long. We want the reader to be able to understand what's going to be in the figure by glancing or looking at the title. So here we have this flow chart here, workplace flow chart. When we're looking at the figure, that's not really telling us much about what we're looking at. What about the workplace? Is this even a flow chart? Usually flow charts are more about a process or a decision that's being made, and this doesn't seem to match that. So here we have a better title. I won't read the whole thing, but It's a longer title. It tells us that it's a framework and not a flow chart. So that's a little different because we know now that it's going to help us to understand the relationship between different ideas or theories that they're talking about in the paper. We know that it's about racial microaggressions. And so this gives us a better idea of what this figure is about. This figure title might seem a bit long, but I would argue that it's important because it's calling out the ideas that are in the figure. So they're using just enough and not too much for this figure title. Let's see here. And so next, we have figure labels. These labels will depend on what kind of figure that you have. So here so they show what each part of the figure represents. And again, it depends on what kind of figure you have to know how you'll label it. Here we have a bar chart. So we're going to have our axes here. Our y-axes are x, and we're going to make sure that we put our measures here so we know how whatever variable is being measured. We're going to have a key or a legend here where it shows us what the colors here represent. And then it looks like here, this one isn't necessarily clear. It looks like we're missing something because we don't know what's being measured here with the tick marks on the y-axis. And we don't know what the age groups are and how we should read this figure. So a good edit would be to add the age group label here so that we can understand, or add the adolescent young adult labels here so that we can understand what is meant by age group. And also framing score here. We know now what we're measuring with these tick marks. Even though I haven't read this paper and I'm not really sure what a framing score is or what is necessarily being measured, I can still tell from the title and from these labels a general idea of what's being measured and who is in the study. So here, we don't want to have missing or confusing labels, and that was the mistake that was made in this example. And then finally, we have figure notes. You'll remember from another slide that we don't necessarily need to have figure notes, but a lot of figures do. So they explain details not captured elsewhere. And they can also contain p-values or attribution for figures that came from somewhere else. As far as style, you'll want to begin with the word note in italics, and then we'll want to write whatever is in the note in a paragraph form. Some common mistakes are non-italic notes, the word note, and then inconsistent wording in the note versus the text. So here we see in our figure here of these bees, I'm assuming they're bees, that whatever's in the note is in bullet points. And we know that we want it to be in a paragraph form, so that's not quite right. So here we have it rewritten in a paragraph form. We have note here italicized, so everything seems to be in order. And I want to point out too that in terms of here, they're using legs in their description in the note. And so we can assume that that's what they're talking about here, these little appendages. But if we look in the text and they use something like arms to refer to these, that would be an inconsistency between the text and the note. And so we want to make sure that we use the same wording in both so that the readers are not confused. And so those are the basic elements of putting together your figure. Let's go now to Tim, who's going to share some frequently asked questions or some answers for figures.